Well, first of all, let me welcome all of you here. I don't know about all of you. I thought I had traveled the entire state of Idaho. You may know that over the last 5 or 6 years, I've tried to do and succeeded in doing a town meeting in every incorporated town in Idaho. And then I started on all of the unincorporated towns. There were 200 incorporated towns and approximately 200 unincorporated towns. I've only gotten through about a quarter of the unincorporated towns. But I thought I had driven most roads in Idaho. And I don't know about all of you, but this is my first time on this road and my first time here. So it's a pleasure for me to be in another one of the incredibly beautiful parts of Idaho. But we're here to talk about agriculture today. And I'm going to make just some brief introductory remarks, and we've got some remarks from a couple of our great folks in the ag community. Let me make sure I got the right order here. Yeah, Zach, where are you? Yeah, Zach, you're first. And I'll introduce you. And then Larry, you're second. And then I'll go third and do wrap up again. And we might even invite a few folks in the audience to stand up and give some examples of their part of this world. But before I do that, I know we've got some other elected officials here. I know of a couple, well, at least one at least. Are there any elected officials who want to raise their hand? I thought we'd had some elected officials here. Please introduce yourselves.
Linda Harkin, District, soon to be District 25.
All right, Linda Harkin.
Chanel Dixon, the candidate for District 24 at C8.
All right.
Glenita Zeiderveld, Senate-elect for District 24.
Thank you. You know, I come from the Idaho legislature, and so it's great when I have folks from the Idaho legislature come and join in on these activities. Let me start out, first of all, I think everyone knows this is a news conference on the impact of inflation on agriculture, which of course translates into the impact on prices, food and everything else probably essentially that we deal with. And we are standing here looking at the energy side of this equation, but we'll have some more discussion of that from our experts from the agriculture community. You hear those of us in the battle in Washington talk about the inflation a lot. We have had trillions of dollars of debt-financed spending in the United States that is driving this inflation, record inflation. We are at 8.5% inflation today, and the administration says that's great because it's not 9.1, which was the previous high. Both of those numbers were 40-year records. The 8.5 got hit first, and then it went up to 9.1. And we're going to talk today about what that means. It comes from an uncontrolled, unfettered spending spree in Washington, and a taxing spree in Washington, and a regulatory spree in Washington that is driving up prices. It comes also, particularly in the energy zone, from the policies of this administration that have depressed American production of oil and gas products. When President Biden was elected, our nation was energy independent, meaning we were supplying all of the energy needs of our country with an excess that we were using to help send to Europe to help them reduce the pressures on them from Russia on their energy policies. Today, because the administration has shut down production on our public lands, shut down our offshore production, shut down the development of Keystone XL pipeline and other pipelines, and stopped the development of lots of our efforts to develop the capacity at ports to have the refining and storage capacity to ship our products overseas, we now are energy dependent. And we are actually asking other nations to increase their production so that we can be saved from our own lack of energy independence. We're talking about OPEC, other nations in South America that frankly are often not too friendly to us. And we are in a position of essentially bleeding out our strategic petroleum reserves and asking other nations to help us out in our energy crisis. Today we're going to talk about what that means and what it translates into here in the United States. But let me turn the time over now first to Zach, Zach Miller. You live in Rigby, and are the president of the Idaho Farm Bureau. Please come up and share with us some of your information. I'll bet some of these charts are yours.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you, Senator. I am Zach Miller. I actually serve as the CEO of the Idaho Farm Bureau Federation. Our president was unable to attend today, so I'm here in his stead. But a couple things I wanted to speak on behalf of all the farmers and ranchers in Idaho and even that nationwide we deal with. When a farmer decides to go into the business of agriculture, they agree to a couple truisms that don't change. Number one is that Mother Nature is their partner. And Mother Nature does not take advice from a farmer. The farmer listens to Mother Nature. The second is that when you become a farmer, you become a price taker and not a price maker. Regardless of their size or their effectiveness, no farmer can actually control the price that they receive. That's a worldwide market structures we see with Ukraine, as the good senator spoke about with inflation. The farmer is a price taker. Whatever they can do and whatever margins they work off are of their blood, sweat, and toil and their intelligence to find how to find a margin of what the wind is blowing in my back, of what the market will allow them to do. A couple other things that a farmer would like to do that drives them to that. Obviously, farmers are like every one of us in society. They want to provide a good life for their family and be able to raise their children in a way they desire in God's greatest country of freedom.
I'll hold it.
Thank you, Senator. The second part is that they truly take great amount of pride in the fact they are a farmer and rancher, and they're providing food to put on the plates of every American and every global citizen. And in America, we take great pride in knowing that we truly do produce the cleanest and safest and healthiest food in the world. We have structures in place. We have farmers that study, that have education, and make sure that the food we're putting on America's table is safe and clear. However, with the inflationary environment, that puts a pinch on them. There's a list of things they must do to provide clean and healthy food, and those prices don't change. They can only go up, but the costs don't go away, which puts a farmer in today's environment in positions that they may not be happy to experience. They have to make choices that aren't what's necessarily best for the consumer or for themselves. We're seeing right now significant challenges in farm country. Equipment, as you see around you, can be very hard to attain right now. We have good dealers, we have good relationships, but we know of farmers that are waiting up to 2 years to receive equipment of replacement. There's nothing that can fill the gap until that equipment arrives. We're seeing extremely, and as the senator spoke, our fuel prices, our fuel and fertilizer prices are at record highs. When we put our crop in the ground months ago, we had no idea what today's prices would be. The cost of growing that crop never changed, but our input cost did. Because we're price takers and not price makers, all we can do is absorb that margin, which can put us at times in a negative position. We don't know the relationship between input costs and our prices we receive. Sometimes they work in tandem with each other, sometimes they oppose one another. The challenge is over the prolonged period of time, the longer inflation sets in on us, the more likelihood that those prices that we pay versus prices we receive are going to come at a negative inference, and that the farmer will take the hit. That may mean legacies are lost and ability to feed the world is taken away. On top of all those other things, we're experiencing an extreme labor shortage. We run risks, maybe not in Idaho, but throughout this nation, of crops that may go unharvested, not for lack of production, but for lack of the available and willing labor to produce that crop. That's requiring us, and we have need of a broken system to become fixed. We've got to have available, willing labor, which exists, wants to be here, is willing to work and receive a good wage, but because of regulations and because of their challenges, that's withholding us there. Now, if we add all that insult to injury, one of the perhaps most challenging things that we're facing in our society right now is the effect that it's taking on the consumer as well. Farm Bureau does a market basket survey every 4th of July and every Thanksgiving to establish and know what does it cost an average American to have a 4th of July barbecue or a Thanksgiving dinner. This last 4th of July, we saw that in the shelves of the stores, consumers are paying at least 17% more for their food this year than last year. The challenge that comes with that is while some of us complain, the worst and most insidious part of this whole inflation is that those that are most vulnerable are the ones that may have to choose of what they can and cannot put on their table. So as we spin that back and look at the desires of our farmers, they want to be able to provide for their families, but nothing hits at the heart of a farmer or rancher more than when they think of the fruits of their labor may not be attainable for their neighbors in the very cities and towns in which they work. That's a cost of a price taker. That's a cost of inflation when other people in our towns, our neighbors, can't afford the food, the very best food in the nation to be able to buy, the best food in the world to buy. And that trickles into our world citizenship as well. So as we speak to you today, as Farm Bureau, some of the challenges we're facing, we're asking for a conditional addition, and we appreciate the relationship with the good senator on, is immigration reform. We've got to have the tools that allow us to do what we do best. And we need to see, not control, no way do we ask for control. We believe in free markets. But we need to be able to know a choice that's made in December, that we can be able to have a reasonable expectation of what that might look like when harvest comes in August. And with that, thank you.
Thank you, Zach. Stick around, because when I'm done, we may have you and Larry come back and help answer some questions. Next, we've got Larry Hollifield. He is a farmer in the Hanson area, that's what I understand, and is the president of the Twin Falls County Farm Bureau, correct?
Yes.
Larry.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator, and thanks all for attending. First of all, I want to thank my good friend Brian for letting us use his facility here. It's a beautiful facility, and I want to really thank him. And some of this data is what we as producers have seen in the last year, and I just wanted to relay some of this. Wanted to start off with a quote. This is from John F. Kennedy back in September 22nd, 1960. "The farmer is the only man in our economy who buys everything at retail, sells everything at wholesale, and pays the freight both ways." So just think about that somewhat. I'm going to just run through some costs here that we've seen in the last year, and this is kind of from June, July 2021 till June, July here recently of 2022. Our baling twine has had an increase of 21%, and that's a string we use on these bales you see us haul our straw and hay off in. Miscellaneous chain we use on our machines to operate them has seen a 17% increase. The tires for our pivots has seen a 43% increase, and those go flat quite often and have to change those. Just the trucks, the tires on these trucks, like the ones you see passing, have seen a 19% increase, so that's really hurt our freight. Coming back to the fuel system you see behind me here that Brian has, unleaded fuel in June 2021 was $2.79. In June 2022 of this year, it was $5.36, 92% increase. On-road diesel, $3.22 to $5.67, a 76% increase. And off-road diesel, $2.98 to $5.17, a 73% increase. To visualize that, to fill one of these tanks, the difference between 2021 and 2022, the difference Brian had to pay to fill one of these tanks in off-road diesel was $43,800 from one year to the next, in the difference just to fill one of these tanks. Fertilizers, one of the inputs we use to grow our commodities, has really increased. Dry nitrogen went from $471 to $928 per ton, a 97% increase. 32%, which is the liquid nitrogen we use to fertilize our crops with, went from $362 to $790 a ton, 118% increase. 1152, our phosphate, went from $682 to $949, a 39% increase. And potash went from $453 to $891 a ton, a 97% increase. It's very difficult to market our crops when our inputs just keep skyrocketing. We don't know how to plan and how to market our crops. And like Zach said, I just want to reiterate, farmers are price takers, not price makers. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, Zach and Larry, stay close. I'm going to ask you to come up and help me field questions. But before I do, I just want to make a couple of wrap-up observations. When we talk about these various issues, the point that I think is raised is that we need to address them, deal with the inflation, and get back to a stable, powerful economy. How are we going to do that? I just want to hit 3 or 4 things that we are working on. First, energy. We've got to get America back into the business of producing our own energy. We need to become energy independent again. And we can do that We can stop the bans on our development of our marketing of our own reserves, our own oil reserves on our public lands and our offshore in Alaska, as well as the pipelines and building the infrastructure to make us once again a leader in the world in terms of energy production so that we can strengthen our economy. That's something that we can get done if we can get the political willpower in Washington to do it. We proved just 2 years ago that we can do this. It requires Washington to repair its broken energy policy. Secondly is labor. It's already been referenced that we need to have the workers, and this is not just for the agriculture community. We need to have workers across our economy. We know that unemployment is low, but it's hard for people to get jobs. I mean, for owners and for companies to fill jobs, to get the workers to come back to work. We can do that by passing sensible immigration policy, closing our borders to the illegal, unbelievable, again, record-shattering crossing of our borders illegally that is generating a fentanyl crisis, a violence crisis, and a labor crisis in the United States. And we need to have a sensible system by which those who can come to our country to work can have a legal route to come to the United States, have a worker visa, and then participate in helping us grow and strengthen our economy. Our agriculture community has been crying for these fixes for years, and we need to continue the pressure to do that. Another area is trade. The current administration has literally refused to negotiate or engage in negotiations on any further trade agreements with other nations where we can lower trade barriers and move America into an exporting, strong economy so that we have stronger markets for our products. And then another area is infrastructure. There's a tremendous need for infrastructure in America, whether it is the pipelines for our oil and gas, or whether it is the roads that we drive on, the ships, the waterways, the airports, the railways, broadband, many other aspects of the infrastructure needs of our economy that will make us more competitive globally. These are the kinds of things that I'm working on in Washington, D.C., but they're the kind of things that I'm hopeful that America will demand that we get focused on, because I think America needs to understand what's happening, why it's happening, and what we need to do to address it. So with that, Zach and Larry, why don't you come back up here? But before I open it up for questions, I think there are a couple in the audience who might have some examples in your own world. And now, Brian Jensen, why don't you tell us about your particular part of this world?
Come up there.
Sure. Brian didn't know he was going to be asked to do this.
Well, talk about me putting on the spot here. My name's Brian Jensen. I'm the parts manager at Stotz Equipment, the John Deere dealer here in Twin Falls. I was talking to the senator before the press conference here about some of the increases that I've seen in parts. Larry had hit on the twine, and that is a very accurate number, 20%. It's not going to go down either, unfortunately, next year. Haven't gotten any hard numbers yet, but I have been informed that there will be increases on twine. I've been informed by all of my vendors, whether that's Stihl, Honda, John Deere, Lemken, Kuhn, we're looking at increases before the end of the year.
About how much do you think?
I'm going to assume 6 to 8%, depending on the vendor. On top of the 20% increases that we have had since August of last year. These are incremental increases. Sometimes it's 5%. The next month it might be 1%. 3 months later, we might see an 8% increase. But in about a 14-month period, 14-month period, I've seen 20 to 21% increases across the board. As the senator said, logistics is something that infrastructure is something that we need to work on in Washington. I completely agree. We have been having troubles with the logistics, getting stuff here in a timely manner. That's the biggest concern for me, is making sure that guys like Larry have their parts when they need them. Stuff that used to take 3 to 4 days is now taking a week. Next day air freight that's supposed to be here the next day takes 2 days for some reason. So these are problems that, how they go down the line, it's amazing seeing where the problems fall on their face. But I am hoping to see that in 24, 23 looks like it's going to continue as this year did. But in 24, I am seeing a little light at the end of the tunnel that maybe things will start tapering off a little bit. So,
Thank you, Brian.
welcome.
Are there any others in the audience? I was told there are maybe a few folks here who have examples they would like to share. If not, I have an observation on what Brian just said. All right. Without any other takers, Brian, let me ask you. You and I talked about supply chain issues. And that's kind of what you were talking about in terms of the delays. The bill that just passed in Washington, D.C., which was called the Infrastructure Protection or Reduction Act, falsely, it does not reduce inflation. But one of the things it does do is to put $300 billion of new taxes on corporations of certain sizes. And people say, well, why can't we just tax corporations? The tax on these corporations is passed on, and the people who bear the burden of that tax by all different kinds of analysis that is going on around the country is roughly a third in three different categories. About a third of it is passed on in price increases. About a third of it is passed on to labor reductions, reduced wages or reduced growth in wages, reduced benefits, and reduced employment. And about another third is passed on to the owners of the stock of the corporation. And that is, no, not the rich fat cats, which are claimed to be cheaters. It is people across this country who are trying to save a little bit of money, either through their pension plan or their 401k or their own investment with a little bit of their extra revenue, if they have any anymore, to try to get a little bit ahead on preparing for their retirement. Their growth in their pension plan, their growth in their 401k plan, and their growth in their personal investments will be reduced. And the American Manufacturing Association indicates that this tax will slam the manufacturing industry. But at least 50% of it will be hit on the manufacturing industry. And think about supply chains. That's where the hit is going to be. The same study by the American Manufacturing Association says that next year, this will all reduce the size of our economy by about $16 billion. And it's expected that that reduction will carry out year after year after year as we simply shrink our economy by making ourselves less competitive and driving up inflation across markets. So I really don't have any other observations to make. So are there any questions? And help me out on this, guys. Looks like we've answered them all. All right, well, thank you everybody for coming. Broadcast this information to everyone you know, not just the media, but everybody. We need to help America get educated about what is happening, why, and what we need to do about it. Thank you very much.